on 7 o'clock by my watch. So
Yeah, I've got the top of the hour as well. Oh, there we
yeah,
go.
good. Okay, we are now officially live. So welcome everybody. You have been listening to us rabbit on for a few minutes, but now we are going to rabbit seriously. This is the panel on publishing in the time of COVID-19, or as I've been calling it, publishing under the pandemic. And as usual, we will do the traditional thing by starting to introduce everybody. So, Pablo, would you like to go first?
Sure, thanks, Charles. My name is Pablo Effendini. I'm the publisher of Fireside Magazine. Uh, this is our summer issue, which coincidentally has a story by one of our co-panelists. Yeah, I'm based in New York City, and I'm originally from San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Okay, Dave.
My name's Dave Ring, and I'm new to the game here, but managing editor and publisher of Neon Hemlock Press. And two of our titles are coming out on September 5th, and that's Yellow Jessamine by Caitlin Starling and Stone and Steel by Ebony Dunbar.
Magic. Okay, and Neil.
Hi, I'm Neil Clark. I'm the publisher and editor of Clark's World Magazine and an anthologist, editor of the best science fiction of the year, or the best science fiction of the year series that comes out from Nightshade Books.
Okay, and I'm Cheryl Morgan. I own Wizard's Tower Press. We do books and stuff. This is one of the more recent ones. It's The Green Man's Foe by Juliet McKenna. You might have heard her reading it early this morning, convention time. And book 3 in the series is due out on the 2nd of September. Now, the thing that we noticed in looking at the description of the program is that it talks about traditional publishers. It is our panel of traditional publishers talk about the state of SF&F publishing since the pandemic, what's changed, what's not. And as far as we can work out, none of us are exactly traditional publishers. So I think the first thing that we should do is explain what our business model is. What sort of publishing do we do? Dave, would you like to start?
That's a strong opening gambit. I'm so new, I don't even know what my publishing is. So I'm coming at it from a place of enthusiasm and also interest. And both, it was initially founded in order to put out chapbooks rather than typical publications. So these small guys for the Queer Literary Festival that I organized. And then from there, it sort of took on some steam of its own. And so I'm focusing on novellas and also putting out an anthology as well. So sort of magpieing the different parts of the genre that I'm interested in going for it.
Okay, Neil, your turn.
Okay, so I end up covering a lot of different territory. So with Clark's World, we're online, ebook, audio, podcast, print edition, and there the print is print on demand. But I also publish some books, and some of those are traditionally published and sent into national distribution. And then I also work with other publishers, and in those cases, it's traditional publishing with national distribution.
Okay. And Pablo.
So Fireside Magazine started as a Kickstarter funded online only. No, I'm sorry. We started as a Kickstarter funded POD and online magazine in 2012. And we moved to online only very quickly, 3 issues in. And when I took over as publisher in 2017, I decided to start publishing in print as well. We do offset, and it's printed in 2 colors, and there's illustrations and whatnot. So we are funded entirely these days. We did a few Kickstarters the first few years to fund the first few years of the magazine, but these days we're funded entirely by our subscribers. We have a subscription tier that is $5 a month for an ebook only version of the magazine, which goes out to our subscribers monthly. And then our print subscribers for $10 receive a print magazine every 3 months, 4 times a year. And we're also free to read online.
Okay. Wizard's Tower is actually celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, and it originally started to help mid-list writers. We were going through a phase 10 years ago where a lot of mid-list writers were being dropped by their publishers because mainstream publishing was moving from the idea that they had an author and they managed their career to the idea that they had an author, and if their next book didn't sell more than the previous one, they would drop them and they would bring in somebody new. So a whole bunch of mid-list writers were getting dropped. There were a lot of these people were friends of mine, and ebooks were relatively new at the time. Not many people knew how to make one. I had some web design skills and whatever, so I said, look, I will set up a publishing company, give me your books, and I will put them out as ebooks, and that will keep you in front of the public. So that was the original business plan. But then I got involved in a local convention called BristolCon, and there were some people there who wanted to do anthologies to help promote local writers. So a whole bunch of keen young writers in the region who wanted to get their work out. So I said, sure, yeah, I'll do an anthology and whatever. And people said, well, that needs to be print, right? It's not a reprint or anything. It's new. It has to be print. So I ended up paying a lot of money to people to do book layouts and not making any money out of that. So I taught myself to use InDesign. And now I'm doing a whole pile of print books, and we're even doing new novels. The Juliet McKenna book, which I talked about earlier, this is the second in the series, third in the series coming out soon. They are all original novels, and they're doing remarkably well, which I'm kind of pleased about. So that's what we do. The next question, obviously, is how has that changed because of us all being cooped up at home? Neil, your turn to go first.
Well, I was already working from home, doing all the work out of wherever my laptop ends up. So that didn't change. What changed around the house is having more people here, so there's more interruptions. Subscriptions and things like that have, ebbed and flowed a little bit more unusually than they would normally. You might, I think we've seen some spikes occasionally with the podcast, and then it'll valley for a little bit and then it'll spike back up. And I think that's partially due to the fact that so many people aren't commuting. And that tended to be where a lot of the audio was being consumed. Submissions wise, we're seeing, I think in March we hit bottom. We really saw a cratering in submissions then, but every month since then, it's gone up by about 100 more. So we're now closer to 1,400 submissions a month, which is well above our average, which was around 1,100 beforehand. So that's increasing the workload to try and keep up with all of that. Otherwise, the other big issue is that we're having difficulty with printers, just because so many of them are closed, and shipping with the postal service the way it is right now.
Okay, Pablo.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Neil's preoccupation with shipping. I'm frankly, I'm very worried. If the USPS goes or is substantially altered, I don't know what I'm going to do about the print edition, because that's the only way that the numbers work out. In terms of general effects of the pandemic, for the most part, I work from home as well and have since 2012, just in general. So the big change has been, having my partner and my family being here all the time as well, and trying to work around that. Turns out that I end up waking up at 4 a.m. to get some stuff done, which is not cool. But you do what you have to do. In terms of submissions, we've seen it be pretty steady. We're not open continually. We open in periods, and we've had three submissions periods over the course of the pandemic since March rather, and they've been pretty consistent with past performance. We're only open for a week at a time, so it's hard to see trends so it's just these three data points really. But we haven't seen a lot of change there. And with subscriptions, the same deal. It's been pretty steady. I keep, I'm not really a pessimist, but I like to be realistic, and I keep expecting, people to get tight and people to drop their subscriptions. And I keep, I run my numbers every week, every Monday morning. So every Monday I wake up and I'm like, okay, is this going to be it? Is this going to be it? But so far it's been steady, which has been heartening. And I think, the opposite of what goes on with audio and podcasts has been happening for us, at least. You're home, and we do put out a print edition that a lot of people really enjoy, and being home and having access to these things more on a day-to-day basis probably makes people hopefully value these physical objects a little bit more.
Dave?
Well, so my books that have come out, aside from the chapbooks, I think the first ones came out April 5th. So this world is the only world I know. And as far as what numbers are, I also I'm using a distributor as well, but I am also just learning how to try to figure out these numbers, and the fact that it's like I'm paying to ship them to Amazon, but Amazon doesn't pay me until they sell them, and just figuring out what that means for me. And it's been largely opaque, so I'm figuring out as I go. But because I funded them initially on Kickstarter, that funded the printing of them, so at least that part is like off my back. But I still am staring at the numbers, trying to even understand what they mean for me.
Much sympathy, yeah. I don't have any subscription things, so I can't really see any trends in things going up and down. And we only produce a small number of books a year. I think last year we only did 2 new books. This year we've done rather a lot, but part of that is because I've been bringing some of Juliet McKenna's old novels back into print. So we actually had a whole 5 novels come out at the beginning of the year, but they were reprints, so not hugely exciting stuff. But we have 2 new books coming out at the end of the year. There's Juliet's book in September, and another one, a collection of translated stories by a Croatian writer called Aleksandar Žilšak. And so we were going to have 3, but COVID happened, and the person that was involved in doing number 3 for me has a whole bunch of other things that are now occupying her life, and that one is not going to happen in time. But small press, I'm perfectly happy to wait until such time as people are ready to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. Most of our sales are still actually ebooks, so I don't think we've seen anything in the way of a dip in sales. In fact, everything is going remarkably well at the moment. Bizarrely, but very fortunately, Amazon UK decided to put The Green Man's Foe on sale for the whole of August. So that's available for 99p, and we've been busy promoting that. And because Juliet and I have now learned how to handle an Amazon promotion, we put the first book in the series on sale as well, so that people could pick that up. And it so happened that book 3 was due to go on pre-order for the whole of August anyway. So we've got all 3 books in the series out there. And I looked at the numbers yesterday morning, and in total, we have sold over 1,000 books, which I'm really pleased about. Now, in my case, most of those are on sale, but we've got over 200 pre-orders of the new book, and that's far better than I've ever done before with pre-orders. The other thing that we decided to do is that with everybody stuck at home, we'll put out some free reading, some short stories that we will stick up on the bookstore, and tell people that they can have a free short story every week. Now, we've had to stop doing that because we've run out of short stories that we could put up there. But it did actually bring a whole bunch of people to the bookstore, and we've had people buying books from the bookstore, whereas previously they would have bought them from Amazon, and I'll just put out a link in the chat, which hopefully our lovely convention people will move into the Discord. So if anybody wants to pick up those free short stories, then they can go there and do so. Yeah, and that's appeared in the Discord. Wonderful, thank you. So that's what's been happening with us. What's been happening with the big boys? Neil, you have some books that are traditionally published. What have you seen happening in the big wide world?
Well, you know, they've had some of the same issues we've had with printing. You're seeing a lot of books delayed. You know, so that seems to be impacting it the widest. There were some publishers that laid people off in the middle of all of this, which is unfortunate. So you know, they're really not in such a dramatically different boat than we are. They just have more people, so more things can possibly go wrong, but they also have more people to cover for one another. So, you know, right now we're all pretty small groups. Our teams are relatively small. So if one of us is off dealing with something that has a significant impact, so they can bounce back a little bit better. But we'll see how things shake out in the next few months. I know that a lot of the backlog is scheduled for late this year. And if we hit a second wave and that closes printers or distributors or bookstores again, that will be a problem.
Yeah, that moving things back has certainly been happening in the UK, but it's been happening in quite an interesting way, that they don't always move back the whole thing. For example, my friend Tiffany Angus has got a debut fantasy book out called Threading the Labyrinth, which is great, by the way. You should all go and read it. Now, that was due out around late spring, early summer, and the publishers decided to push back the paper book until much later. I think it's now available, but they put out the ebook at the original planned time. So it was available as an ebook from then on. I have no idea how that's worked for Tiffany, but at least there was something happening there. But clearly the big publishers are pushing stuff back. There was an article in the Sunday edition of The Guardian last weekend that said that there will be over 600 books, new books, published in the UK on September the 3rd. Now, how bookstores are supposed to cope with that, I do not know. Clearly,
readers are supposed to cope.
Yeah. You know, so that is utter madness. I'm pleased to say that Juliet's new book is coming out on the 2nd of September, so we've beaten the flood. But yeah, it's complicated. Pablo, Dave, have you got any experiences of how the big publishers are dealing with this?
No more than just paying attention to maybe the weather changes amidst dates and trying to learn from folks' lessons, because I'm still in that take in and then iterate mode of figuring out what to do. Like one of my titles that like I've been lucky, like my printer Bookmobile in Minneapolis hasn't had any issues, and like where one of my upcoming titles sold out of like the limited print run that we were planning on, and then I have to figure out how to do a second print run for the first time, which is a good problem to have. But that's like that's the closest I've got to this one.
Yeah, the closest I get to seeing things on the ground is production, on the production side as well. And in terms of printers, it's really interesting. I've been realizing over the last couple of months that a couple of things that I did in 2019 ended up being really, really helpful. And one of them was finding a new printer for Fireside Quarterly. I was originally using a printer in Germany, and then I moved to using one of the big printers that most American publishers use for their offset printing. And then I was not happy with them for various reasons and moved to a Canadian printer. In fact, Bookmobile is one of the people that I was talking to when I was doing this stuff last year. And you know, one of the things that we all saw coming, because it's really interesting. This is, well, I guess that's why we're here. We're talking about publishing. This is inside baseball time. One of the really interesting things that happened last year is there was a large folding of a large printer in the US, Thomson Shore. They handled a lot of work for some of the big 5 publishers, as well as, you know, they handled Fireside and a few other things. And that led to a consolidation where another, they were actually acquired by Edwards Miller, I think is what they're called. Anyway, they were acquired by another printer, and that shift in resources, in clients, and in work, you know, in trained craftspeople, really had an impact on the flow of books. And then the pandemic hits, and not only are you having these shakeups in the traditional, the offset world, the offset printing world, but also Lightning Source, Ingram's Lightning Source, which is a large POD service, starts having supply issues as well, because, you know, they're facing the same issues that we all are. But it's been really interesting to see how, you know, some of those US centric operations have been affected more so than like my Canadian printer. They've been, you know, fingers crossed, but they've been, you know, on point all year. I've sent 2 issues to press with them and shipped out to subscribers already during the pandemic. I'm about to send off the 3rd one. And, you know, I'm a little worried about this one because we're cutting it close, but not because of them. We're cutting it close because, you know, I work with different editors, and each one has had their, you know, some people have had issues, and we've tried to be as accommodating as possible because, like you said, Cheryl, you know, life is happening to everybody really hard right now. So, you know, it's taken a little longer to produce this one. But so far we've been pretty fortunate with our printers. They've been knocking it out of the ballpark for now, but you see it on the POD side. You see it with some of the American printers where they're really having trouble, you know, keeping the ball rolling.
Sure. There's a question come in from the Discord, which I'm going to address now because it follows on directly from what Pablo was saying. It asks whether publishers use POD in the same country as the client's address to save on shipping costs for them. Now, the client, of course, could be anywhere in the country, but I do all of my printing through Lightning Source, and Pablo mentioned earlier, they're owned by Ingram's, who are a UK company, but they have printing facilities in both the United States and Australia, and I think possibly in Europe as well. So I can get my books printed much closer to the client. And that's good for me, particularly if I'm putting out books by American authors. So earlier this year we launched this one, Unjust Cause by Tate Halloway, aka Lyda Morehouse. And because Lyda is an American writer, she's much better known over there than she is here. And consequently, that book is selling much better in the States, whereas the Juliet McKenna books are selling much better in the UK. But I've been watching the emails that I'm getting in from Lightning Source, and they are, you know, as far as the UK is concerned, not a problem. As far as Australia is concerned, not a problem. Every week or 2, I get another email from them saying, I'm sorry, the lead times for printing in the US are going back and back and back. So clearly there's an issue there. And, you know, now that the USPS is apparently struggling, I think I need to find another way to send money to Lyda because I've been sending her checks in the mail. It isn't going to work anymore. Pablo also mentioned people going under. I don't think we've had any printers go under in the UK, but we have had a distributor go under. And that is a major problem because, you know, printers, you know, there are plenty of them. Distributors, there are very, very few. So Bertram's, who is a major distributor, has gone under. I've just posted a link, which I'm sure will appear in Discord very shortly, about that. And that's caused huge trouble for UK bookstores who normally were able to work through them.
Well, bookstores in general are facing serious issues, and one of the, you know, speaking of traditional publishers, one of the big tentpoles of a traditionally published books launch is, these in-person events at bookstores. And a lot of what has been going on this year has been, reworking that format into something that's online. And, we've seen a lot of that happening, but yeah, physical bookstores are getting left behind in that process. And it remains to be seen how that's going to shake out, especially for smaller indie ones. Because Waterstones, well, they can weather the storm, right? They were already going through their own drama, but they're a larger company as well. Barnes and Noble, these bigger, although Barnes and Noble has been reducing their real estate footprint as well. So yeah, it remains to be seen how this will affect physical bookstores.
Yeah.
There's actually a secondary side effect to all of that, and that there's a direct correlation to print books being on a bookstore shelf to ebook sales. Yeah. So with bookstores closed, I haven't seen any significant data yet, but I'm expecting that to actually result in slightly lower sales, because that's how some people discover the books out.
Dave, any experience with local bookstores in your area?
The local bookstore that we work with the most, or have been in talks to do that, is Loyalty Bookstore in Silver Spring. And they're a Black woman-owned bookstore, and they're dealing with like a different kind of issue, which is like they're getting a lot of support right now from the country in a way that makes it challenging to focus on small presses like me, because they're kind of like participating in this larger narrative right now. But I'm really looking forward to having those connections with the local bookstores when things settle down, or figuring out a way to shake those into new relationships. We did an event with, Golden Ark in Montreal. What's the name of that bookstore? This is terrible. We did a really cool event with them, and I'm having a brain issue remembering the name of it, but it's Montreal's oldest bookstore, with all of our novella authors, and did like a panel and a reading, and that was just a cool connection. And then they're shipping the book locally to folks in Canada. So those kind of things, or it's like a hybrid, connected to a brick and mortar store, but also having an online component. There's a little bit of a song and dance to it, because you could be doing it with anybody anywhere, but it's still like making connections to people.
Sure, yeah. Local bookstores here in the Waterstones have pretty much killed off the local bookstore business in the UK. There were very few cities that had an independent until very recently, but over the last year, people started opening up bookstores again, which was quite unusual. And I'll be interested to see how many of those actually survive. But it's been clear that people have been learning to cope under the pandemic, turning themselves into online businesses and doing interesting stuff like book recommendation newsletters and all that sort of thing, just to leverage their base of customers who would normally come into the shop, and now that they have to deal with them remotely instead. Bookstores here are now open again, although I haven't actually been to one yet. All we have in town is a Waterstones, and there's not a lot of point in going to that. But doing readings and events like that is clearly an issue. And that's had direct implications as well for staff. For example, many of you may be familiar with the Forbidden Planet bookstore in London. And if there are any authors listening to this, you may well have had an event organized for you at Forbidden Planet by my friend Danny Ware. And Danny was made redundant by Forbidden Planet during the week because they are not doing events anymore. So there are direct and very personal costs to the fact that events like that can't be done.
There's something to be said though for, I know there's like online event fatigue, screen fatigue, and that's very real, but like myself and another writer, Marianne Kirby, who happens to live in my house, so we can do events together. Like we do like a talk show style reading thing that we're calling Neon Hemlock Live every month, and we've got folks coming in on Instagram Live. And it's funny because those events like will have 15 to 30 people, which at a bookstore would be a perfectly serviceable crowd. And so it's actually like a really cool kind of moment that I don't know that we would have like put energy into if it was possible to do in-person events. So that kind of like push towards other angles of connection and whatever else, I think is pretty valuable.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's certainly
definitely.
something that I'm considering doing now that we've got things like Zoom that we're used to. And I'm quite annoyed that I missed the Friday night parties here at NASFiC, because that GatherTown thing that they were using for the Friday parties seemed to be a very interesting thing. So I might just run a book event with that to see how it goes. Julia, if you're listening, don't don't worry. I'm not going to throw you into it unless you're happy with it. But we could do something like that.
Yeah, I've been
Anyway,
thinking about it as well. It's a question, at least in my case, it's a question of bandwidth and time to be able to organize all that stuff. But it's definitely extremely compelling. It's certainly in many ways more accessible, than me trying to, go talk to the folks at Café con Libros or, around the block or whatever, and do something online that, as you said, Dave, it brings in more people where like, something that's run of the mill, your 15 or 20 people would be a blockbuster event at a small indie bookstore. I mean, I don't know if you could fit 20 people in Café con Libros. That's overflow probably, but
20?
anyway, yeah.
That's a good number.
I'm in Brooklyn. It's a small store.
yeah. So how do we think long term this is going to affect us? I mean, I know it is very hard to say how long COVID is going to be with us, but do we think this is going to result in any major structural changes in the industry? Neil, you've been around longest. Do you have any thoughts?
Oh, I guess I'm sort of like Pablo there, worriedly checking those numbers every week, because I keep expecting it to go down with so many people out of work or otherwise busy, or everything's so distracting. Now, if one thing comes out of this, it sort of reminds us that fiction, is a useful distraction, and people value it at times like this. So, we're fortunate in that regard. I know it's held a few of us back from addressing some of the pay issues we've got. Being able to increase like I know a few places that were planning on increasing their subscription price so that they could adequately compensate their staff, and this is not the time to be doing that. So all those efforts are being put on hold. Those could have long-term consequences, but I think for me it's reminding me why I got into this field in the first place, and because the feedback we're getting and the communication we're getting from people right now, and the amount of understanding we're getting when all these things go wrong. I'm hoping that patience doesn't wear out over the next 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have any thoughts on the future?
Echoing what Neil said, I mean, I think there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. There's, I think it's, if somebody's telling you that they've got a line on what things are going to look like in, July 2021, well, good luck with that, buddy. Waiting for that, not necessarily pessimistic, but like just kind of that crash. It's interesting you bring up the revenue thing. Yeah, we were thinking of figuring out how to raise our prices a little bit, and what that has forced me to do, which is a good thing actually, is to try to reframe the problem in my head. How do I, instead of trying to extract more value from my subscribers, how do I try to figure out a way to provide more value in order to justify a little bit more revenue from them? And what that has, it sounds like semantics, and it sounds like kind of just splitting hairs, but at least for me, reframing the problem in that way has led to some pretty interesting connections, and tying it into some other ideas that I had, which hopefully I'll be able to implement by the beginning of next year. where, you know, play around a little bit with the types of subscriptions that we offer, and engage, in fact, with which I know is one of Neil's areas of interest as well. Engage with the problem of free fiction, you know, of which we're part of that issue. How do we continue to advocate for the value of the work that we put out there when, you know, we're putting the work out there for free as in beer? And that dichotomy and that kind of struggle is something that I'm keen on trying to figure out whether we can do it better, and whether, I wouldn't go as far as to say whether we can put the genie back in the bottle, but something to that effect. I don't know. We'll see.
I know it's a little unfair on you because you've only just started, but do you see a different future now than when you first came up with the idea?
Yeah, I mean, all the projects that we've gone into have had like a pre-sale component to it. So it didn't feel scary thinking, how do I put this out? Will people buy it? Because I basically asked people to buy it beforehand. So it was like, oh, people want this. I'll make this thing. It was a little daunting pulling the trigger on the second print run, because that's feels like I'm doubling down there. But we've also started a new flash fiction magazine called Baffling Magazine, and we're focusing on queer flash fiction. We're using Patreon for that one, and the plan is to just grow it with the Patreon base. And if it doesn't grow, it's not going to grow. So it's and that feels comforting too, because it's just going to meet whatever the demand is and stay there. So I'm trying to scale my expectations with what people have said that they want, and do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you know, nothing very much has changed apart from one book being unavailable because the people writing it weren't available. But the company is carrying on as before. I'm not subject to the same sorts of pressures that mainstream publishers are, except maybe the issue of getting printed books out to readers in the USA. So as far as I'm concerned, they're just going to carry on doing stuff. But there is this, well, there are two interesting questions. Firstly is that because bookstores aren't there, can we do something of our own in terms of promotions? And we're starting doing that, obviously doing more stuff through online conventions, but doing specific online events through the company is definitely a possibility. The other thing that I am looking into is the possibility of selling print books direct, which we still have a postal service in the UK, so we can do that. It's not something that I've done before because it's simply too much work. You know, actually parceling books up and sending them out to customers is a job. But it might be the only way that we can actually get print books to people if, you know, bookstores are not selling them and whatever. So there's that possibility as well.
It's funny. I started the current print run of Fireside Quarterly using a service that was turnkey, which was you know, was taking care of the shipping and logistics and whatnot as well, and that very quickly turned out to be not as, certainly less labor intensive, but not as accessible and as feasible as just doing it ourselves, at least at the scale at which we're operating. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, Cheryl.
Yeah. Has anybody noticed anything to do with audio? Because something that occurs to me, that particularly in the UK, is that people are not commuting to work by train anymore. If they're commuting to work, they're having to drive because they don't want to go on public transport. And that might mean that they're not consuming audiobooks in perhaps the same way that they might do.
Well, I've heard from other publishers that audio books sales have been down. But like I said earlier, the podcast has been unusual. It's up some months, it's down some weeks, and it's just off pattern. And the best I could figure was it was the lack of commuting, that people were listening on a different schedule than we were used to seeing.
Yeah.
We don't do audio right now, although it's something I'm considering as a thing to pilot, maybe using the Baffling Magazine Patreon at some point. But the Tantor Media did buy the rights for Yellow Jessamine from Caitlin Starling, and that's coming out the same day as the book. So I don't know if the purchasing is slowed down from the publishers of audiobooks anyway.
There's a comment that we've had in from the audience about free fiction. Graham says, maybe free but not free forever. Pay if you ever want to be able to come back to it. I'm not sure how that would work. Neil?
That's called a reverse paywall. It's effectively what you're doing is you put up a piece of content. I think there's a big publication that does this. It might be The Atlantic, it might not. I don't remember. But you put up a piece of content, you have it for free online to read, and then after a period of time, you take it behind a paywall. So you're always providing a constant flow of new things to read for people who want to read things for free. But if you want to dip into the archive, you have to pay a subscription fee. Ask me why I know. It's one of the things that we're looking at trying to do next year.
The one issue that comes up there is that some of our like some of your big stories, for example, that drive a lot of new traffic to your site would then suddenly end up behind a paywall. So an alternate to that actually is free 10 free reads or 20 free reads for the month. And and there's ways around that and everything, but you know, there's a lot of different models around that. One of the things that's more or less been proven is that paywalls generally make the publication suffer. So if it causes you to lose readership, when you know that your giving rate is directly proportional to your readership, it becomes problematic.
Yeah, it's always trade-offs, right? You're trying to figure out, you know, what works best for what. But yeah, there's different formulas out there, or formula is not really the right word for it, but there's different approaches, and you know, I think it's worth, you know, spending a little time exploring different ones. You know, see what works, and maybe something works for Clark's World that doesn't work for Fireside, or vice versa. You know, it's like you said, it depends on your readership and the way that it behaves. And
I mean, you already have some of this too with the publications that are bi-monthly and release half their content early. There's no real indication that it's giving them any advantage over people who are releasing immediately.
I mean, that's basically what we do with our print magazine. You know, like if you're subscribing to print, you're getting things way before, and it used to be just 3 months, but now I've pushed it out more just because it's easier for us production wise, and it allows me a little bit of editorial freedom in terms of slipping things in. But that's essentially what we're doing. You know, if you're subscribed to print, you're getting things ahead of people who are seeing it online, or people who are seeing in the ebook that they pay for, and then people who are online. The one thing that you did mention earlier, which really resonates with me, is, you know, interest in a particularly around awards season, which I have complicated feelings about awards as a publisher, but one of the things is that, you know, when a story gets nominated, you know, interest goes through the roof. When we had a story by Fenison Jelly Clark nominated for a few awards last year, and you know, the numbers on that story were amazing. I think if we had been running some kind of a paywall back then, at that point, I probably would have taken that story and just kind of put it out there so that people could see it and have it be accessible, and just, you know, in the moment, right? You want to respond to those things, but yeah, it makes it a little bit more challenging for sure.
Sorry, I wasn't laughing at you, Pablo. There's a question come in from
That's okay if you were.
Eliana, which says, what is the best way to make a magazine sustainable? If we knew that, Eliana, we would be millionaires by now.
Actually, Dave is on the right track. Start small, spend what you have coming in, and grow over time with interest. That's the biggest mistake a lot of magazines make. They launch with what they had in their mind as their dream vision, and they run out of money really fast. Or they find that they've now got themselves into an unsustainable model where they're really in trouble every year.
Minimum viable product thinking is really helpful in that respect. That's what we did. So for Fireside, we launched in 2012, and up until 2017, 18, I'm sorry, which is when we launched the print version, we were just that. We only bought what we could afford based on the revenue that came in. When we decided to make the leap to print, obviously there's upfront costs that go along with that, that we had to kind of put in there. But we ran the numbers. We said, okay, if it's going to cost us X amount of money to spin up this print production, how quickly can we get to back where we were, where like our revenue is sustaining, that production. And we ran the numbers, and we said I needed X subscribers by X amount of time. And I believe it was by January of the following year, or by the end of the calendar year. And I think, we made it by January of the following year. So it was a little close, but you kind of play the numbers, and you make sure you run it. I mean, you run it like a business, honestly, because that's what it is. For better or for worse, that's the world we live in.
Yeah, this is kind of turning into a rerun of the panel I did 2 hours ago on running a science fiction organization, where there was a lot of talk about planning and budgets and all that sort of thing, and whether you had a big vision and you went for it, which Marianne Mahanraj can do because she can inspire people, and other people say, no, I start small and I grow the thing, and if good happens, and good happens. Anyway, we are inside the 5-minute warning, so we should now be thinking of wrapping up statements. Dave, you haven't had a chance to talk recently. Have you got any inspirational last words for people?
I keep getting these doozies, Cheryl. I don't know. I think the success of most great things that I've worked on have come from good collaborations. So I guess if folks are looking to either get into publishing or get connected to it, is reach out and talk to your peers and see what connections you can make and build off of each other's skills. And yeah, like teach yourself InDesign.
Yeah, it's remarkably easy, I found.
After trying to make things italics, I can't get over that still.
I had to put in a shout out to my boys at Affinity. They put out software that has been specifically designed to take on InDesign, Photoshop, and Illustrator. And I transitioned to using their software last year. And as somebody who'd been jockeying InDesign, Photoshop, and Illustrator for the last 25 years, it's been surprisingly accessible and surprisingly smooth transition. So if you're afraid of the Adobe beast, there are alternatives out there.
Do not ask me to go anywhere near Photoshop or Illustrator, because I am completely hopeless at that. But InDesign, if it's just words, I can do it. Neil, any wrap-up words?
Well, I think I thank you in general to everybody that's still reading and listening and buying what we're putting out there and what everybody else is putting out there. That's what's keeping this industry alive. It's what's keeping our spirits up. Mm-hmm. Just thank you and all the people who are sending the stories to us. I mean, that's we're nothing without them.
Yep.
Pablo, wrap up.
Yeah, I just echoing Neil. I mean, we do this. We like we were saying, we can't do it without money, but we do it for the love, and we do it for the readers and for the writers. I mean, that's the lifeblood of this world we live in. And yeah, thank you to everyone who supports us, either with money, preferably with money, because that's what makes things go. But with everything, like you get an encouraging word from a high school teacher, and you're like, oh wow, that makes your day. So yeah, thank you.
And yeah, I'm not planning on going anywhere at the moment. As long as I don't actually contract COVID myself, then I will carry on publishing and doing stuff. And maybe one of the effects of this is that there will be more small and interesting niche publishers. I'm delighted to know about Dave's company, and there seem to be a lot of exciting things happening, particularly in queer science fiction at the moment. We've got a queer bookstore has opened up in York, the Portal. Hi folks, good to have you there. and let's carry on publishing great books. And I think we are almost run out of time now. We haven't actually been kicked out, but there isn't a countdown clock to say where we are. If people want to carry on
now, though. Thank you all for coming.
We are
wonderful
now
panel.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we are now done. Okay, so off to Discord then, folks.
Sure. Where in Discord?
Scioto even?
Even. Okay.
Yeah, Scioto even it is.